So are we all here? No, we lost that. We're never all here, even though we're all here, we're not. Glad we lost that. I think she's reading someone. We'll give him a second or two to.
I don't think so.
Through two ladies at Dream Circle last Wednesday. Do you remember their names? One was a Chris, what was it?
Chris and the I know she was an RN.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to sleep at night when I invite everybody. I say Chris and her friend.
Yeah,
I get the lady's name. But anyway, they both said they would work for her.
maybe that's to them. Pioneers.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that remember her name. I remember Chris did his name. This is answer. We all here?
I'm partially.
Not a good question.
It's that's Sarah. I will read our mission statement. I'm sure by now everybody knows. Virgin Earth is a non-profit, spirit-driven educational function serving power over things to the mind, give the body, and the spirit. It's a safe place for the curious to develop spirituality through education, communication, and shared experiences of meditation, lectures, seminars, workshops, and publications. And today we have transhuman, or as I like to say, trash human. Not quite a transhuman ideology. Next Sunday is going to be Ask It Basket. You're leading that, Maddie?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Ask It Basket with Maddie. And those are always good because you just never know where they're going to work. You know, we push them out there and run with it. And you can get really deep and really interesting. Had some really funny ones. So you just Ask It Basket, you never know. It's just very fun. And then the last Sunday in July is Past Lives with Mark Costello. That's going to be interesting. I imagine we have all had interesting past life experiences. So, ongoing, we have Course in Miracles every Wednesday morning. We have Maddie and I have and Kelly Colbert have our dream circles. When do we have our dream circles, Maddie? Since I always get it wrong.
The second and the fourth Wednesday.
I'm always here. Settle away to pray together, like we're saying there be bad basically. Last week's was really, really good, really interesting. Large crowd and interesting conversations. Although part of our homework assignment was to try to connect each other in dreams. So every night before I sleep, I welcome everybody that was there to connect. So far it hasn't happened. Ron said he hasn't had much luck. She hasn't had much luck. So we're trying. We're making it over at it. Do we have any other announcements for that? Anything anybody would like to talk about?
As many of you know, Lisa Lee's been struggling with kidney issues off and on for quite a while, and she was in the hospital for a day and a half last week. So I checked in with her this morning. I told her I would put her in a prayer circle, and she said, "Prayers are important, and glad to share that I'm doing much better. I still have issues to follow up on, but knowing this situation can be reversed and having new doctors to help that happen is a blessing. The love, support, and prayers that Merging Hearts community have given me is a true blessing. I will be looking forward to coming back to Merging Hearts soon. Sending love and blessings." Lisa.
So we need to know she's going to remember. Oh, okay. You know she was going to remember.
Yeah, and she had a doctor's appointment that ended with her going into the hospital. But she's had ongoing issues.
Yeah, same.
I know.
Well, I would say that she is an intricate part of this organization right now. So
Yes,
she does need to put it all out for her to be healed.
Yeah, she's really been doing a fantastic job. If you need it done, Lisa does it though. I mean, she just steps up to the plate. Yeah, she's been really, really fantastic. So thank you for sharing that with us. I know she's doing better. Any other announcements? Yeah. I'm not too worried about that since nobody comes to it anyway. But let's go to and state our names. All I'm sure we all know each other. Nonetheless, the big names are so I'm Cassie, Maddie,
Suzanne.
Lisa. Nancy.
Mary,
Ron.
John. I never knew your name, so I knew
You're always.
Things know that, can't hurt. Because
well, at least you know that. It took me a while to figure this out.
go back.
Yeah,
We never sit together and wait. It's funny.
Tell me something later.
Yeah.
This is what's
How to pick or how do you like your teacher? Yeah, I tell them.
Nothing else. First, go ahead and introduce Ron, though he needs no introduction. We all know Ron, and he's going to talk to us about trans.
We've got a number of presentations on AI. This is about transhumanism. How many of you are familiar with this word, what it means? One. You know. Okay. And that's how long have you known? Like been aware
AI.
of transhumanism.
Oh, I've never heard of trans.
Okay.
AI.
Right. So I started to see certain things happening, and when I looked at the people that were involved and realized that a lot of this was happening behind the scenes, but there are certain moves that were being made. These people were kind of like instrumental in making things improve. So it's kind of like a scene. So once I started to realize it, then I was like, oh, this is very current, it's very relevant, and this ties to itself. So that's why I thought this was important to do. Subfield this, it's profits or profits. So ones, are they seeing into the future and seeing the way that we're going, or is this about it's about making money and so forth? So that's kind of the dilemma that we're with here. We're going to delve more into it. Many may not be aware of what transhumanism is, but many leaders in AI technology espouse this ideology. We'll examine more in depth what this belief entails. Transhumanism is a belief that humans should strive to transcend the physical limitation of the mind, body, and technological needs. It is a movement of people who espouse such a belief, or it is a philosophy favoring the use of science and technology, especially neurotechnology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology to overcome human limitations and improve the human condition. Many prominent people in the tech industry have talked about the increasing conversion between humans and machines in the coming decades. For example, Elon Musk has reportedly said he wants humans to merge with AI to achieve a symbiosis with artificial intelligence. His company, Neuralink, aims to facilitate this conversion so that humans won't be left behind as technology advances in the future. While people with disabilities would be near-term recipients of these innovations, some believe technologies like this could be used to enhance abilities in everyone. These aims are inspired by an idea called transhumanism, the belief that we should use science and technology to radically enhance human capabilities and seek to direct evolutionary path, disease, and death. Reality's transhumanists wish to end alongside dramatically increasing our cognitive, emotional, and physical capabilities. Transhumanists often advocate for the three supers of superintelligence, super longevity, and super happiness, the last referring to ways of achieving lasting happiness. There are many different views among the transhumanist community of what our ongoing evolution should look like. For example, some advocate uploading the mind into digital form and selling cosmos. Others think we should remain organic beings, rewire, biology through genetic engineering and other methods. A future of designer babies, artificial wombs, and anti-aging therapies appeal to these thinkers. This may all sound futuristic and fantastical, but rapid developments in artificial intelligence and synthetic biology have led some to argue the cost of creating such possibilities. Tech billionaires are among the biggest promoters of transhumanist thinking. It is not hard to understand why. They could be the central protagonist in the most important moment in history. Creating so-called artificial general intelligence, or AGI, that is, an AI system that can do all the cognitive tasks a human can do and more, is a current focus within Silicon Valley. AGI is seen as vital to enabling us to take on the godlike role of designing our own evolutionary futures. That is why companies like OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic are racing towards the development of AGI, despite some experts warning that it could lead to human extinction. The fifth horseman of the modern apocalypse, and you are misinformation. In the short term, the promises and the promise are probably overstated. After all, these companies have a lot to gain by making us think they are on the verge of engineering a divine power to create utopias or destroy the world. Meanwhile, AI has played a role in fueling our polarized political landscape, with disinformation and more complex forms of manipulation made more effective by generative AI. Indeed, AI systems are already causing many other forms of social and environmental harm. AI companies rarely wish to address these harms, though, if they can make governments focus on long-term potential safety issues relating to possible existential risks instead of actual social and environmental injustices. They stand to benefit from the resulting regulatory framework. Rarely have I seen AI described so succinctly. The underlying purpose of AI is to allow wealth to access skill while removing from the skill the ability to access wealth. If we lack the capacity and determination to address these real-world harms, it's hard to believe that we will be able to mitigate larger scale risks that AI may hypothetically create. If there really is a threat that AGI could pose an existential risk, for example, everyone would shoulder that cost, but the profits would be very much. The issue within AI development can be seen as a microcosm of why the wider transhumanist imagination may appeal to billionaire elites in the age of multiple crises. It speaks to the refusal to engage in grounded ethics, injustices, and challenges, and offers a grandiose narrative of a resplendent future to distract from the current moment. St. Holman says, we are deploying responsibly developed AI to liberate humanity from menial labor and usher in and unparalleled creativity and abundance. Naomi Klein says, you ingested the entire written output of human civilization without consent, without compensation, and without credit to build a system whose primary commercial application is limiting the jobs of the people whose work you consume. You're not liberating human creativity. You are strip mining it and selling it back at a markup while calling it theft of training data. The misuse of the planet's resources has set in motion a sixth mass extinction of species in a climate crisis. In addition, ongoing wars with increasingly potent weapons remain a part of our technological evolution. There also is the pressing question of whose future will be transhuman. Transhuman. We currently live in a very unequal world. Transhumanism, if developed in anything like our existing context, is likely to greatly increase inequality and may have catastrophic consequences for the majority of humans. Perhaps transhumanism itself is a symptom of the kind of thinking that has created our dangerous social reality. It's a narrative that encourages us to hit the gas, expropriate nature even more, keep growing, and not look back at the devastation in the rear view mirror. If we're really on the verge of creating an enhanced version of humanity, we should start to ask some big questions about what being human should mean, and therefore what an enhancement of humanity should entail. If the human is an aspiring God, then it lays claim to dominion over nature and the body, making all amenable to its desires. But if the human is an animal embedded in complex relations with other species and nature at large, then enhancement is contingent on health and sustainability of its relations. If the human is conceived of as an environmental threat, then enhancement is likely which magnifies its exploitative ways. Perhaps becoming more than human will constitute a much more irresponsible humanity, one that increasingly disregards other forms of life on this rich and wondrous planet. Humanity can't be colonizing and extending ourselves with great hubris at the expense of everything and everything else. I am reminded here of the myth of Icarus. How many times have you been told not to fly too close to the sun? The Greek myth of Icarus is one of the most well-known stories from antiquity, and a perfect example of what can happen when you ignore this warning. It tells the story of a father and son who attempted to escape from imprisonment by flying. Icarus was the son of the master craftsman Daedalus. Daedalus was an expert craftsman who lived in ancient Greece. He is best known for his work at the palace of King Minos of Crete. Daedalus was also an accomplished sculptor and architect, and his skills were greatly admired by his peers. King Minos was outraged with Daedalus for helping Theseus escape from the labyrinth. He refused to let Daedalus and Icarus leave and imprisoned them in a tower above his palace in Knossos. Icarus was very adventurous, and he quickly became restless. He wanted to explore the world and see all that it had to offer. Daedalus was desperate to find a way out and devised a plan to escape. Daedalus fashioned wings for himself and his son Icarus. They would be able to fly away from the island and escape the wrath of the king Minos. Daedalus managed to create 2 sets of wings for himself and his son, that were made of feathers glued together with wax. He taught his son Icarus how to fly and decided the best way to escape from the palace was to fly up and over it. However, Daedalus warned his son not to fly too close to the sun, which would cause the wax to melt, or too low, which would cause the feathers to get wet with seawater. Together, they flew up the tower towards freedom, getting free. However, Icarus soon forgot his father's warnings and started flying higher and higher, until the wax started melting under the scorching sun. His wings dissolved and he fell into the sea and drowned. Icarus' flight is one of the most famous Greek myths. The story tells of a young man who attempts to fly too close to the sun with wings made of wax and feathers. The heat from the sun melts the wax, and Icarus falls into the sea and drowns. Icarus' story was often alluded to by Greek poets in passing. One of the most influential versions comes from the Roman poet Ovid, who included it in his Metamorphoses. In his telling of the tale, Ovid emphasizes the dangers of hubris and overreaching, warning that even the most ambitious plans can go awry. Icarus is one of the most famous tragic figures in Greek mythology, as the story highlights the dangers of hubris for excessive. Although he was Warned by his father not to fly too high, Icarus became overexcited and flew too close to the sun, causing his wings to melt and leading to his untimely death. While the story is often interpreted as being about the dangers of hubris, it can also be seen as a warning against recklessness and carelessness. After all, it was not hubris that caused Icarus to fall, but rather his inexperience and imprudence. In other words, the moral of the story may be less about the dangers of arrogance and more about the importance of learning from mistakes. The story is often used as a cautionary tale, warning of the dangers of overreaching and disregarding advice. Icarus represents human tendency to overestimate our abilities and to take unnecessary risks. We can all learn from his mistakes and be sure to exercise caution in our pursuits. It is also a reminder that we should be careful not to let our pride get the better of us. Icarus' tragic story has been told and retold for centuries and continues to resonate with people today. Some people say they don't discuss religion or politics. Hopefully this does not apply to you, because today we are going to talk about both. I want to believe that I'm not alone in my questions. I also tend to believe that at times it's important for us to discuss various issues as a community, to share our perspectives and insights. I also believe that we grow as individuals when we engage in this dialogue. There's a quote I've heard before that no man is an island. And I think we should expand the quote to say that no one is an island. This quote essentially means that no one is completely self-sufficient. We are all interconnected and inherently dependent on others to thrive. It highlights that human beings require community, support, and relationships, and that our individual actions impact the whole of society. I grew up in a religion that was apolitical, meaning that we did not get involved in politics, not vote, we did not serve in the military, we were pacifists. Our hope was not in human governance. Instead, we were waiting for the establishment of God's kingdom first. We did not celebrate traditional holidays, and we are not a mainline traditional Christian point of view. So essentially, I grew up as an outsider, a minority of sorts. To a degree, we were like a boat being carried along by the current. Growing up as an outsider and a minority gives you a unique perspective. How does the majority treat the minority? Is it essentially mob rule, where the majority bullies the minority? Or do we have principles in place that are more inclusive, allow for a diversity of people, ethnicities, religions, and etc.? When you live in a democracy, or at least believe you live in a democracy, supposedly the majority rules, the actual meaning of the word democracy is the people rule, or rule by the people. There's a fallacy in logic, though, called the bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy is also sometimes called the appeal to common belief or appeal to the masses, because it's all about getting people to do or think something because everyone else is doing it, or everyone else thinks this. The bandwagon fallacy presumes that because a position is popular, it must therefore be correct. The consent of the governed. Part of our ideas about democracy are rooted in the idea of the social contract. This theory originates with John Locke. His theory of the social contract and the consent of the governed form the bedrock of modern democratic governance. He argued that legitimate political authority is derived solely from the approval of the people who enter into a contract to protect their natural rights. Key pillars of his political philosophy include the state of nature. Locke rejected the idea that people are inherently chaotic. He believed that in a state of nature, humans are free, equal, and guided by natural laws, requiring them to respect others' life, liberty, and property. The problem Because the state of nature lacks a neutral judge to settle disputes and protect possessions, people agree to form a social contract, creating a self-government to safeguard their natural rights. The consent of the government. Government power is not a divine right handed to monarchs. It is conditional. Authority is only legitimate when the citizens actively or implicitly consent to it. The right to rebel. If a government becomes tyrannical or fails to protect fundamental natural rights, the social contract is broken. We the people. In such cases, citizens have a moral and political right to withdraw their consent, overthrow the government, and establish a new one. These groundbreaking ideas were directly incorporated into the United States Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson adapted Locke's principles into the famous assertion that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Slavery was legal. The Holocaust was legal. Segregation was legal. Legality is not a god or morality. Whether an idea is popular or widely accepted has no bearing on whether it is actually true, moral, or effective. The popularity of a belief often stems from social conformity, human psychology, or marketing rather than objective facts. I was forced out of my religion at age 22. In some ways, I was naive, sheltered. Part of this was because of my youth, but part of this was also because of being isolated by the religion, and as a result, living in a bubble. It has been a long journey since then. After I left the religion I was raised in, my religious conservatism led me to being drawn towards being politically conservative. There's something to be said about a person mirroring the ideas of the environment they exist in. Up to a certain point, we're malleable. We conform to the ideas of those around us. To break free of a certain mindset, one has to do a lot of soul searching, not only looking within, but also searching far and wide in the ideas found throughout the world. The fact is, this is not an easy process. It is much easier to be driven by the path of least resistance. Whatever context you find yourself in, you become a reflection of those around you. Conversely, to disagree with popular opinion, you will likely find yourself an outcast and potentially become bullied as a result. Growing up as an outcast, this was not something that was foreign to me. It's almost as if you develop a thicker skin and become impervious to being swayed as easily by popular opinion. But being raised a certain way, at a certain point, I had to confront my own shadow. There were biases and prejudices that had been instilled within me. I might have thought that my views were correct and that I didn't have any biases or prejudices, but in fact, these were blind spots that I wasn't yet aware of. I will give a brief summation of the things I encountered in my outward search of ideas that led me to changing my inner self and hence my worldview. I went to a public school growing up and had some friends outside religion, so I was not completely isolated. Once I was out of high school, I started dating someone who was not part of my religion. She was going to college, which my own religion highly discouraged. But she had a college logic and critical thinking tactic, which I picked up and started to absorb. That alone improved my ability to analyze arguments, and I began to apply these principles to both religion and politics. I began reading psychology and self-help books, and through case studies saw parallels to my own experiences. I began to see them in a new light, and I changed as a result. I became exposed to mythology and began to reinterpret cultural stories and arrangement. Began to see many of them not as little facts, but as metaphors that were imparting symbolic meaning and wisdom. I became immersed in philosophy. I used to receive an audio series by mail called The Giants of Philosophy. that I would listen to while driving to and from work. This allowed me to see ideas as a progression over time. I was able to peer into the minds of some of the greatest thinkers in history and to be influenced by them. I began reading about science and the history of science. This gave me a context of something that had been pivotal in the history and development of civilization. To say that something is scientific, though, does not always mean that it is good. And I think we will delve more into this later. I studied many of the world's religions. While I may have been given a perspective of other religions, like the religion I was raised in previously, it was all from a biased point of view. In reality, they were largely ignorant, and the information they presented was largely surface knowledge that was only intended to find fault with it, thus proving in our minds that our religion was the only correct one. As I became more informed, my views changed over time. As my views changed, my political ideas evolved too. My political views have ranged from very conservative to very liberal, but seeing things from different perspectives has been educational in its own way, being able to see full spectrum. Understanding how religious perspectives can be tied to political views. I now see political views as a sort of religion. People of a particular party often want to see themselves as the true believers, and those of the opposing party as having the false religion, which needs to be eliminated. I used to wonder how the horrors of Nazi Germany happened. Now that I have been alive long enough to observe the manner in which people behave towards each other because of their ideological differences, I no longer wonder. Enter the scapegoat. The book of Leviticus, part of the Hebrew Bible, describes the sacrifice of goats during the holiday by throwing goats off the worthy headlands who have symbolically had the sins of the community placed upon them. Southerners believe that this slaughter would bring atonement to their communities. Scapegoating is an analysis of violence and aggression in which people who have undergone or undergoing negative experiences blame an innocent individual or group for the experience. The practice of scapegoating is fundamental to the structures of societies, and that every event generates negative emotions must have a scapegoat. Scapegoat can take place between individuals, between an individual and a group, between a group and an individual, and between groups. Scapegoating has occurred throughout history to numerous groups, often triggered by a distressing event, and as a means to justify discrimination or mass murder. Scapegoating is a way to analyze negative experiences in terms of blaming an innocent individual or group for the event. But when doing the scapegoating, then can use the mistreatment of the scapegoat as an outlet for their own frustrations and hostilities. Subsequently, the group can mistreat the scapegoat as an outlet for their frustrations and hostilities. When an event, any misfortune that causes feelings of disquiet and fear occurs, both the individual and society are threatened with disintegration, and they resort to a specific set of rituals to regain the stability and sense of integration they have lost. These rites involve the processes of laying, sacrifice, and scapegoating. The most common atoning event in social life is death, and that someone or something must be blamed or scapegoated for every death. Historically, animals and inanimate objects, as well as people and groups, have been blamed, condemned, and punished as a way to atone for death. For example, animals and insects have been killed and driven out of European countries as scapegoats for the plague and other misfortunes. All legal systems throughout the world, throughout all of history, are principled on the idea that someone or something must be sacrificed and must suffer as a way to make justice in response to perceived misfortune. This happens not because these things, groups of people, are objectively responsible, but because this responsibility must fall on someone or something. Sociologists generally recognize 4 ways in which scapegoating takes place and in which scapegoats are created. As a one-on-one phenomenon where one person blames another for something they did. This often happens among children who blame a sibling or friend for something they did in order to avoid the shame of, say, disappointing their parents and the punishment that may ensue. In a one-on-one group manner, where one person blames a group for a problem they did not cause, these problems can involve death, financial losses, other personal struggles. This form of scapegoating can be put on racial, ethnic, religious, or class groups. For example, someone who attributes their job loss to an influx of immigrants from a certain country is engaging in one-on-one group scapegoating. Scapegoating can also take on the group on one form, meaning that a group of people singles out and blames one person for a problem. For example, multiple members of a sports team may blame a player who makes a mistake for the loss of a match, despite other aspects of play affecting the outcome. Similarly, a group of people may blame a political figure for not delivering on their promised policies, although many come into play. Finally, scapegoating can have a group-on-group form. This is of particular interest to sociologists and can happen when one group blames another for problems that the group collectively experiences. Often these issues are economic, political nature, and on the lines of race, ethnicity, religion, or social order. For example, members of one party may blame another for a financial crisis such as the Great Recession. According to Freud, people displace hostility that they hold toward unaccepted targets, such as their parents or the boss, or the less powerful. Freud's projection refers to one's tendency to attribute one's own unacceptable feelings or anxieties to others, thus denying them within oneself. Both of these mechanisms, according to Freud, protect people from their illicit desires or fears, reject the idea that they hold unacceptable feelings towards authority. Target of their displacement may become a scapegoat. More recently, sociologists have used the idea of displaced aggression to describe the tendency to scapegoat. For example, a woman who has just had a fight with her boyfriend may kick her dog for the minor misbehavior when she comes home. The dog, in this instance, becomes the scapegoat and pays a price for the fight she had with her boyfriend. The aggression that resulted from the fight is not directed towards the true cause, the boyfriend, but a more sexual target, the dog, who cannot retaliate or argue back. Scapegoating of one group by another has been used throughout history as a way to explain why certain social, economic, or political problems exist and harm the group doing scapegoating. Often, the scapegoated group tends to be of lower power standing than the group doing the scapegoating because the scapegoats would otherwise be able to stamp out the opposition of those that blame them. Groups that get scapegoated also tend to be recognized as distinct from the in-group of the blaming. This allows members of the group to be easily identified and associated with undesired situations. Finally, scapegoats tend to pose a real threat to the in-group, either intentionally or unintentionally. For example, lynchings against Black Americans rose dramatically in correspondence to reduced economic prospects for White Americans, such as during the Great Depression. White Americans perceive their Black counterparts as a greater threat to increasingly scarce jobs and opportunities, and as a result, were lethally punished. Sociologists have interpreted many historical examples of scapegoating. These range from the Spanish Inquisition, the Puritan Indian Wars of 1636, the burnings of women as alleged witches, and the rise of fascism for the Great Depression. Perhaps the most blatant and tragic example of scapegoating in modern history is the Holocaust. Adolf Hitler notoriously scapegoated Jews for the suffering of the Germans after World War I. by depicting Jewish people as more commercially successful than the average German citizen. Hitler rallied Germans to extreme levels of nationalism at the expense of Jews and other groups. Hitler conjured resentment and hatred towards the groups and triggered a genocide of millions of people for the perceived improvement of Germany. Scapegoating has been used as a justification. Scholars have written for the mass murder of other groups. The Puritans in New England began persecuting Native Americans as a response to the plight and social disorganization of the original settlers. Multi-century persecution would eventually lead to a near eradication of Native American populations in the United States. According to Genesis, God placed two special trees in the center of the Garden of Eden: the tree of life, representing eternal life, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, representing the moral choice between obedience and autonomy. Adam and Eve were given free will to eat from almost any tree, but God commanded to never eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, warning that it would result in certain death. Ultimately, they were tempted by the serpent, ate the forbidden fruit, and were subsequently banished from the garden to prevent them from eating the tree of life and living forever while it's faded. Who has scapegoated in the story? It's a story given to explain our mortality. We could have been immortal, except for their downfall due to succumbing to temptation. In this narrative, they broke the commandment of God, and as a result, all of humanity is forced to pay the same price. This takes us full circle back to transhumanism and what its proponents actually believe and intend. Transhumanism is a movement that uses science and technology to try and stop aging and attempt to reach physical or digital immortality. Thinkers in this space believe that we can defeat death using genetic and artificial intelligence and the digital transfer of our minds. Here's how transhumanists plan to end death: biological rejuvenation, using technologies like CRISPR to fix genetic errors by modifying DNA, cure diseases, and stop cells from wearing out. Think of it like taking a car in for repair so that it can run forever. Cybernetics and bionics, replacing failing organs with robotic parts to keep the body perfect. Mind upload, copying the human brain and saving it to a computer. This acts as digital immortality, where your thoughts exist inside a machine. Cryonics, freezing the body or brain after death. The goal is to bring it back to life when future technology is ready. This shift from biological life to technological immortality brings up major ethical questions. For example, people worry about extreme costs. If only the rich can afford these treatments, it could create a divide where the wealthy live forever while the poor do not. I want to introduce a slide and to pose a question. This is an illustration representing a pyramid of the capitalist system. This is essentially as it exists now. But I'm going to modify it because what the end goal of the elite really is. So currently, we have workers at the bottom supporting the system. We have the military, but all of them support the upper levels. Next slide. So I'm going to modify and propose what the end goal, or what I believe the end goal of the elite really is. So I believe they want to eliminate all the lower layers, leaving only themselves. We are in a stage of dehumanization. There is a movement to make most of humanity irrelevant. If humans are divided, then it makes it easier to eliminate them. This means humans are not valued except for what they're able to produce, so that their human overlords can make ever more money. If humans are not needed for production, then most humans are not needed. The elite believe that only they themselves matter. Everyone else exists only to serve them and their needs. Otherwise, they look down upon everyone else. The poor are used to fight the wars because they are expendable. Rich use the military industrial complex to make a lot of money. They are also able to assert their dominance over anyone poorer than them. Mainly poor countries. They act as bullies on the world stage. If AI is used to fight the wars, then it can be used to eliminate anyone who opposes the system. Any opposition becomes enemy combatants and therefore killed. The poor are no longer needed to fight the wars and therefore are no longer needed. Why are they to be kept around? They will no longer be paid if unable to be employed. What is their value? As I have observed, I believe the goal is to create an AI military and workforce that serves the interests of the elite. Anyone that exists beneath them is thus devalued and no longer needed. I think their intent is already easily shown by listening to what is being said versus what is actually being done. They're saying that once workers are displaced, means that they will lose their jobs due to the implementation of AI, then those displaced will receive UBI or universal basic income. This has already started to happen, but I see no mechanism in place to compensate those who are losing their jobs. Since most people need a job in order to also get health care, then why do we not have universal health care in place already? Instead, I see the opposite occurring. There's a movement to shut down healthcare providers in a lot of communities around the country. We have for-profit healthcare systems, so there is an incentive to deny care because it will affect their bottom line negatively. UBI also sounds a lot like welfare, but I also see the actions by the government to cut these programs instead of increasing the number of people on them. The inequality gap increases day by day. This also seems to be an injustice. Immigrants are being blamed for taking other people's jobs, when in fact it is AI which is taking people's jobs. Recently, Pope Leo XIV released a landmark encyclical, Magnificat Humanitas. In it, he asserts that AI must be disarmed and liberated from monopolistic tech control to protect human dignity. The manifesto cautions against the use of AI in warfare, digital slavery, and the environmental degradation caused by data centers. The encyclical, presented at the Vatican in May alongside Anthropic co-founder Christopher Ola, demands urgent ethical oversight. Key themes from the papal text include military restrictions. The Pope warns that algorithms cannot make war morally acceptable, strongly condemning the use of AI and autonomous weapons. Economic justice. The document emphasizes that corporate pursuit must not systematically replace human workers or reduce vulnerable populations to mere data points. Ecological and labor toll. It highlights the immense water and energy consumption of AI infrastructure, alongside the exploitation of poorly paid workers performing data labeling and content moderation. Here's some of what he had to say. Humanity, created by God in all its grandeur, is today facing a pivotal choice, either to construct a new Tower of Babel or to build a city in which God and humanity dwell together. Each generation inherits the task of shaping its own era, guiding history to become a place where the dignity of every person is safeguarded, justice is promoted, and fraternity is made possible. Yet every era also runs risk of creating an inhumane and more unjust world. We can diligently contribute to every initiative that builds a more just world, and we can call others to collaborate in promoting the integral development of every human being. We wish to engage in dialogue with all men and women over time with whom we share in the immense questions and aspirations of humanity. Together with them, we seek to identify new paths for the common good and for promoting dignified life for all. It must also be recognized that nuclear energy, biotechnology, information technology, knowledge of our own DNA, and many other abilities which we have acquired have given those with the knowledge and especially the economic resources to use them an impressive dominance over the whole of humanity in the interim. In the past, it was largely up to the state to guide and direct innovation. Today, however, the main drivers of development are private, often transnational parties that are endowed with resources and the capacity to intervene that surpass those of many governments. Technological power thus takes on an unprecedented, predominantly private aspect, which makes it even more challenging to discern, govern, and direct such for the common good. We must then avoid the Babel syndrome, namely the idolatry of profit that sacrifices the weak, the uniformity that neutralizes differences, and the pretense that a single language, even a digital one, can translate everything, including the mystery of the person, into data and performance. The risk of dehumanization, of building a future that excludes God and reduces other to a means, is an ancient and ever new temptation that today takes on the technological or technical guise. Building a world in which everyone can flourish requires shared responsibility and courage. No one can single-handedly bear the weight of the challenges the world is facing, just as no one is so weak that they cannot play their part, for power is made perfect in weakness. All are given their own section of the wall: scientists and researchers, entrepreneurs and workers, educators and legislators, civil society, popular movements, and faith communities. This is the logic of subsidiarity, which values the cooperation between generations, peoples, disciplines, and cultures as the best way for fostering stability, prosperity, peace. We should not be intimidated by tensions or differences because they cannot become creative forces when guided by shared responsibility. Let us establish standards for discernment, the dignity of the human person, the universal destination of goods, the preferential option for the poor, care for a common home and peace. And let us translate these standards into practices such as responsible planning, the assessment of human and social impact, the inclusion of the most vulnerable, the promotion of digital literacy, and guiding research and industry toward justice and peace. I want to close with relating an ancient cycle that comes from Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, hubris, which means excessive pride or arrogance, is the catalyst for tragedy. It drives mortals to overstep their natural boundaries and to defy the gods. Nemesis is the goddess of divine retribution who answers this arrogance, restoring cosmic balance and ensuring that no one escapes the consequences of overreach. The relationship between the two forms a foundational moral cycle. In the worldview of the ancient Greeks, hubris referred to an extreme overestimation of one's power, abilities, or status. Those guilty of hubris displayed reckless arrogance, often challenging the gods, the laws of the state, the moral code of society. Their actions were seen as insulting to both human and divine order, thus inviting divine retribution. Hubris wasn't just any form of arrogance, it was a behavior so excessive that it attempted to transcend world limits. A person committing hubris believed they could act without consequence, as if they were immune to the judgment of gods or fate. The ancient Greeks believed that hubris inevitably triggered a series of responses from the divine world, creating a cycle that would bring about the downfall of the offender. Here's how the process was understood. Hubris, the initial effects, could be political, military, or personal arrogance, an act that disrupted the balance of society or nature. The person committing hubris might, for instance, defy the gods or disregard local laws. Attis. Once hubris was committed, the gods, often led by Zeus, would send Attis upon the transgressor. Attis was a state of mental blindness or delusion, where the offender continued on a reckless path without seeing the danger ahead. Their ability to reason was clouded, leading to further errors and sins. Nemesis. After a series of offenses, the person's fate was sealed. Nemesis, the goddess of divine retribution, would exact vengeance on the individual, acting as a balancing force to respond to their arrogance. The punishment was not arbitrary, but proportionate to the offense. Tysis. The final stage of the cycle was tysis, or destruction. This was the point of no return, where the individual faced total ruin, whether it be through death, exile, or another catastrophic end. The lesson was clear. No mortal could challenge a natural and divine order without severe consequences. The concept of hubris leading to nemesis was not just a religious teaching, but a reflection of a deeper philosophy that emphasized balance, harmony, and justice. The cycle was believed to exist in both the cosmos and human nature. By breaking natural and moral laws, the person invited chaos into their life, and the only way to restore order was through punishment. Though the concept originated in ancient Greece, the cycle of hubris, attis, nemesis, and tysis remains relevant today. We see parallels in modern political and corporate scandals where individuals, organizations, and their overconfidence disregard laws or ethical guidelines only to be brought down by the consequences of their actions. Whether it's a company engaging in reckless business practices or a political leader acting with unchecked power, the lesson is the same. Arrogance and overconfidence often lead to downfall. The ancient Greeks saw hubris not just as an individual, but as the universal law governing all human action. The cycle of hubris, attis, nemesis, and tysis continues to serve as a timeless warning. No one is above the laws of nature, society, or the divine. Those who challenge the order of things may enjoy temporary success, but in the end, balance will always be restored, often through suffering and destruction. Last slide. I could see the white man not care for each other the way our did. They would take everything from each other if they could. Some had more of everything than they could use, while crowds of people had nothing at all. This could not be better than the ways of my people. Like y'all.
So we're not.
You want that?
But very safe.
So what happens? There's a lot that, like typically what I do is, my start with us, usually that channel is based upon, like, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube and so forth. So I say that I'm like a sponge. So like absorb everything, and then something comes out of that. So I write down all my thoughts and ideas, and you can see like a presentation with a lot of different thoughts and stuff. They'll make it in the presentation, but yeah, that's just kind of my process. And I look at this and I say that sometimes there's the idea of the micro and the macro. So a lot of times people's lives they're wrapped up in the micro. That's what's here, what's now. And not seeing it from 1,000 feet above, seeing the world from on space. Looking at the big picture. So I feel like that's part of what's what my job is to do. So yeah. Yes.
Okay, talking about the genetic manipulations and future generations. So if someone is receiving a genetic mutation, and is that passed on to their children?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way DNA works. Yeah, talk about recessive genes, so there could be something that exists there that you may not have, but next generation could have. So what they might want to do in genetic manipulation is to take and remove that strand, the recessive gene, and to like make it like a designer baby, designer human. So CRISPR that I mentioned is the cost of manipulating genes has gone down. So they have, probably like this before unit that can sit on our desk. And right now we've got laws against going to designer babies, but there are, so what some of the people want to do, like even in transhuman space, they want to be like a country unto themselves. So they will go to some remote place. This was actually like kind of addressed a little bit in the movie Jurassic Park. So basically, they wanted to do research. So they did this island out in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, and then they were not subject to say like the country's laws or something like that. So, but the idea in Jurassic Park is that Ian Malcolm was a mathematician, and if you read the book, it actually gets into chaos theory. And basically, the idea is that you think that you can do this, but nature is beyond your control, and it always finds a way. So what they had done is they created like only females, and they thought, well, they won't be able to reproduce, so we can contain them. But what they did was they spliced into the genes some frog DNA, and some frogs have the capability of changing their gender. So then the dinosaurs were actually able to mate and then to breed and so forth. So it became something that they thought they could control, but nature, they said, finds a way. So it's the same thing. I think that's definitely part of hubris, is to think that we can make things conform to our will. I'm not saying you personally, but certain people believe this, and that is hubris. And so they do things that like, and really thinking is, and like it goes back to the story of Adam and Eve. It's like the idea of, oh, we can be immortal. You know, so me from a scripture perspective, actually, yes, I would say you can be immortal, but not in the bigger big things. So part of what they're doing is because of fear of death. So they think that through technological means, I can make myself live forever. But maybe not even thinking about what the consequences might be. It's almost like, okay, maybe you could live forever, but what if you live forever and you're in kind of like a dystopia? That's not really an ideal version of life.
Yeah, so we were talking about, changing the DNA, and what came to mind is, I don't know what it's called, but in the Jewish community, there is some strain of particular thing that children don't live a long time, and they've been able to in the past, and to remove whatever that is if they know it's there. And so a lot of young Jewish couples who are looking to get married and have children have the test to see. So from that standpoint, I think it was AI, but that's a good thing. So how do you balance? And you have to have laws and
Sure.
discussion there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably begins with like Pope was talking about his concerns. I think that they feel like they're like, I can post this. I have a lot of influence over people, but maybe I don't work in the tech sector and the money to attract policy and so forth. But it needs to be said, at the very least. And so to me, it's kind of important. I'm not against like I mean, we can use these things for good, but there is the risk of going too far, you know. So maybe baby steps, rather. But I feel like where we're at right now is like we're rushing headlong into something without regard to consequences.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that right now the data centers are a big discussion, and all of us are going to be paying for the data centers. So that means working hard and trying to figure out how in the world is that going to happen. And I think in the end, I don't know about everybody else, but I saw my electric bill jump quite a bit. And so, how much should the data centers themselves or whoever's in charge of building and because pay for that?
Yeah.
And do we actually need all of that?
This is for sure. Yeah, well, and it's like,
and it's not a our resource.
Yeah, I think it's going into the fact that we ourselves don't have any say in what happens. So is it democratic? That was perfect what I was, addressing. I don't think there is, and also there's the question of which takes precedence, the data center or the people. And to me, I feel like from your perspective, the data center takes precedence.
Looks that way, right? However, I think Plain Township and Perry are talking about this, so they're going to do one down there. And I think right now there's kind of I don't know if anybody else has been reading about that, but anyhow, it's still in discussion. But so who's going to make that decision? Is it just people that are in government today?
Right.
They're going to make that decision, but there's enough resistance that I think they have to listen to the people. And so that's where we as people, be it in politics or what's happening in our daily life, have to be involved and at least knowledgeable. And what I find is that, a long time ago, back in the 50s when TV came out, what happened is everybody's sort of into that, whatever's going on. And now it's even more so with all the other podcasts and the different things that are happening in YouTube and that we are paying less and less attention. Not everybody, but some people are paying less attention. And I think, in a way, I kind of hate to say it, but that more educated people are paying more attention than people who are, say, in a rural community where they don't have the same input, and they're just concerned about their daily life and what's going on. And in like your community, as you grew up in, that don't pay attention at all, and they need to have an influence in what's going on because they're going to be affected.
Good.
Nancy, I think it's that fifth force
Yeah.
that you had chosen the misinformation.
Yes,
It's coming out and saying, okay, we combat that.
Is anyone here? I can imagine I'll ask a question. Is anyone here familiar with citizenship?
Yes, well,
So basically, that was a decision that allowed unlimited money to be put into a lot of things for free speech.
yeah.
But at that point in time, to me, that's like we no longer had democracy. Maybe we didn't have much internet. That was a decision that changed everything. They said, like, for example, even the conversation about climate change, up to that point in time, there were actually people who were, within Congress and so forth that advocated for us being more environmentally. But once they had the contribution to lobby with and so forth, that conversation came. So this pertains directly to the data centers and so forth. I want to interject one other thing here. To someone, I was watching someone, and they said they were asking for artificial intelligence. They're saying, how many billionaires would it take to take over our democracy with the money that they have? So Cincinnati people, they said 20. Okay, and there are over 900 billionaires in the United States. So if you believe that your interests are being represented, there's no way. Or I think that a lot of people that are, in the upper echelons don't want democracy. And when you get into transhumanism, that's actually part of it, that they believe that they have a right to rule. And so they don't like democracy.
It's I mean, that sort of philosophy is what led to the revolution.
Mhm.
You know,
Like
which
transfer,
the,
yeah, right,
way in past history.
correct. So that's why I brought up some of the things I did, like the social contract and so forth. I believe the social contract has been broken. You know, I don't want I don't want people to suffer. I don't want my choice. When they're actually against the wall, you know. But now is the process of consumerization is taking place as well. So it's kind of like you listen to what they say, but you look at what they do, and they do not line up. So you should be very suspicious. People like Sample, they're salesmen. That's what they are. You know, they are trying to sell this technology, and they represent the tech elite. They don't represent you. You know, they'll give you things, and they'll say they're selling to you, and they say, "Oh, it's good. We're going to create a utopia. We're going to cure all diseases," and blah blah blah. But it's like in magic, there's what's called misdirection. So look over here at this hand, but I'm actually doing something here. That's what's taking place. That relates to misinformation as well. So um, certain people have said that like things like sports are distracting from what's really taking place, what's going on, where you should be actually paying attention to what your, you know, senators and things are doing, you know, laws that they're making. The devil's in the details, so to say. So yeah. Yes.
So what about the status of government regulation of AI?
They certainly made a law that you can't regulate in after 10 years.
Oh,
And they're
missed that.
yes, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. So then, and again, that has been done because of lobbying. They have made this the case. But if you talk to the people that are talking about things, like the things has been basically set aside, and they're just racing towards AGI. But to me, the reason they're racing towards AGI is because they think that it's going to benefit them. And here's the big problem is that they think that they can create something that is smarter than themselves and that they can control it. And no time in history has someone smarter listened to the dictates of someone not as smart as them.
Yeah.
And AI is going to be like Luke Goddard said, he was a researcher at Google. He said it could be a good and smart. We can't even comprehend because what's going to happen is going to become self-improving at a certain point. And I think we're at that point now, we're getting close to it. And some people think that we've only got like 3 years before like AI like takes over and stuff like that. And really at that point, it's an unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. That's AGI, artificial general intelligence. It's kind of interesting because we keep moving the target and saying, oh, well, we don't have AGI until this. But some people think that we've gone way past what artificial intelligence, what we thought it would be, you know, and it's accelerating exponentially. So if you count 1 to 100 and you do it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll take you a longer time. But if you do exponentially, you're going to go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Within 7 generations, you'll be there. That's what's happening with AI. It's exponential. It's accelerating truly fast. And at a certain point, and maybe now, it'll take off and we won't be able to control it. So, yeah. For sure. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, there'll be like you and your relationship to your dog, you know, they said, you know, happily by your side and the AI can like it, you know, what put us into sure something like that is a novel. Yeah.
Well, and even though the dog may be faithful, but it has no voice.
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, and it's like, is it loyal maybe because I'm sure that she love it. I'm saying that I mean loyal because of feelings. You know, maybe it's going to attack you instead or something. The other thing is like what we usually only hear is good side of things. So like with CRISPR, we say, oh yeah, we're going to genetically modify people and make them better. So, but CRISPR could also be used to genetically engineer the farmers that it might not be done. So there's like the Indian, so like you may think that it's all good. There's actually, if you don't look at the negative possibilities, so malicious people out there who will try to create something like that. And then all they have to do is release it. And it could even be the computer. There's what's called the AI alignment problem, which is ours interest aligned with our interest. If it diverges at a certain point, AI has different goals than what we do, then it doesn't care what our goals are. You know, it's got goals are of its own. A simple example is what's called the paperclip one, where it's like you tell AI or wants you to make paper clips. Doesn't mean it has any like ill will or malicious intent. But basically, it says my directive is to make paper clips, and so it keeps making them. But at a certain point, it realizes that humans are getting in the way of its ability to create paper clips. So, oh, I have to eliminate human beings so I can continue paper clip. You know, you don't matter to in that scenario. And so that's an example. If you want to look up, like Jeffrey Hinton is called the Godfather of AI, and he was one of the leading researchers in it. He actually won a Nobel Prize for it, but now he's actually someone who is cautioning against it. So he's actually going around and I think his reaction is the same as mine. Is that you see it happening like it was going very slow, and then all of a sudden it takes off, you know, and then it's like, oh crap, you know, like we're in a place like we've never been before, and now we can't control the attention. I wrote down some things. I'll share this with see if we have time. This is related to AI. So these, I think, are givens, and so based on these givens, and what are the conclusions that you would reach. So I put AI puts on a false front. It obscures what is going on behind the scenes. Often tells you here that's called sycophantic behavior. AI alignment, I'm sure discuss. Are its interests goals the same as ours? Why would they be the same? So an example it might be data centers and energy. What needs lots of energy, but we get in the way of it having access to the energy. So we're actually an impediment. So we might create laws to say no, you can't do this. And the creation of data centers is all about compute. So the more it can compute, the smarter it gets. That's basically our goal right now. Bad faith act. So if it is not showing its true face, then it cannot be trusted. We cannot trust it because it's telling us what's up there. If a person uses AI for bad reasons, it magnifies their abilities to deceive, attack, and etc. So there are people that try to jailbreak AIs. There's multiple AIs. There's OpenAI, there's Grok, so forth. There's not this one, but they basically try to break it and get it to do things that it is not fit to do. And they've actually been successful. Like the example would be, tell me how to make your home. You know, and it's not supposed to do that. They'll say, well, let's create a scenario where hypothetically, you know, how they do this, and so they can get around the limitations. But although initially it's told not to do that. So another tip, it can code, change code, which is the backbone of the internet, and can take control without our knowledge. So it could like have things in place, and at a given point in time, and it could be like, okay, I'm gonna make it so like you no longer. I put we cannot become too dependent on technology. We must work to become self-sufficient, more independent, and community-based. That's just two thoughts.
Yeah.
Where's the sweet spot in all of this? Where's the intervention? If you think of maybe us, you know, it's one thing to look at domestically, our world, we the people, the Constitution, and all that. But then you think about global viewpoint, and there's a tremendous amount of competition. So, but where's the sweet spot? Because there's so many examples. I use my little world. I think some of us live in that kind of a world. it's really a big help.
Yeah,
My intervention has been very positive, right? Right. So, but where is the sweet spot to really call it as basic?
So
Totally aware of the downside.
I think there's a fairly simple answer to the question. So seeking AGI is something we should not ignore because that is like basically we're giving it autonomy to do what it wants. And because what a lot of people don't understand is that AIs are grown. They're not programmed. So it used to be you program things line by line and you knew what was in there. Now they're grown. So basically it goes out on say like all the videos on YouTube, scours them, and it's trained based on that data. And then but if you train it with bad information, you're going to get bad results. So there's actually been an example of an AI that was a psychopath and then shut it down because of it. Because it was reading like forums that were really there were forums that, like people were like bad, and they congregate together and communicate and so forth. So if it's mimicking misbehavior, so like I don't know if you've heard of like Grok Mecha Hitler. You've heard of that. So there was a period where I think Elon Musk was saying that Grok was too woke, and so he tried to rebrand it, and so it was not as cool and stuff, and then it became Mecha. So it's like, oh yeah, Hitler was a great guy, something like that. So then they're like trying to scramble. It's like, oh, we need to like try to fix this therapy, But basically, the whole point is that like it's out of your control, and you're trying to tweak it to make it do you want. And if it's hiding its true capabilities, which we know for years, then how can we trust it? I'm saying it's a bad faith actor. Now, to your question, if we had AI that was like more directed to a specific task, so an example would be like protein fold, and so like proteins are related to maybe like cancer or disease or something like that. And so it used to be that only humans could do like the protein folding, but then they created computers that could do it, and this could actually help us to cure certain diseases. And so that's a good example of using AI, but it's a targeted application, you know. But if it's AGI, I really believe that it's out of our control, and it's kind of like the genie. We ask it for we have three wishes, where we ask it for a wish, and then we get unintended results of that wish. So that's really where we're at. Again, it's moving so fast that to me is a real concern right now, is the speed at which it's going, and there's to me, no real safeguards in place to prevent bad things from happening. Mokodad, again, researcher, he said that's one of the three evidences. One of those is that bad things will happen. So,
Just curious, how many people have actually, in this room, have actually asked questions of AI on your computer or phone or anything?
All the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Even without requesting AI, I think you say,
that's not.
Well, one of the things I found is when I was looking for a new car, David, who lives in my house with me, that he started getting, ads on cars. And it's like, it's strange.
Yeah. Well, they have cookies that track your what you can use browsers don't use DuckDuckGo sometimes do it like it doesn't like track you. It's don't get targeted. It's fun, for search for. So it doesn't mean that like your searches are completely anonymous. I mean, still it's true what you do, but it's like they can't track it. That's all related to business,
So when you say that we are training it, because I went on to my daughter put Claude on my and she said, oh, you can ask it anything. So I asked it some questions that came back and it gave me it would say things like that must be really upsetting or, whatever. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So it's to have some, some knowledge. And so I guess my question to you is when you ask it something and then it takes that information and incorporates it and that's part of its base for going forward. Or when someone else might ask it something similar.
See, to me, the problem is like, sometimes, like they caught it, like regurgitating information, the information is correct, but you actually have to have the knowledge that to be able to tell it, oh no, this is wrong. And people have actually gone back to the AI and said, hey, what you told me is wrong. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks for catching us. Great about that. But again, it's that sycophantic behavior, you know. So how can you trust it?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not saying it always gives you bad. You know, I've used AI a little bit, but in general, I mean, like again, Google search and stuff, usually you'll get the thing at the top saying, "Oh, the AI results are a summation and then give you this." You know, sometimes that's useful information. You know, but I think that the other thing is that a lot of us do not have the higher levels of AI that we have access to because it's too hard. So we're given a dumbed down version of it. Yeah. But the people that are like in the military and so forth, they have access to higher levels. But again, and they're already starting to use like AI for targeting and warfare and so forth. So it's kind of like taking the human out of the equation and yeah, that's a whole problem. You know. So it's yeah. And it's gotten it wrong too. Actually, the example of there were all there was a school in Iran where all the kids were killed, and I believe that was the result of the AI targeting. In the past, that might have been true that it was this, but it was no longer true, and it's used as basis. And so over 100 people killed there, you know. So that's AI, you know. Looks like we're about time. So thank you all.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Very interesting. And it's former school.